I don't know if you happened to see Nathan DeBruin's interview with Nick Rekieta the other
I saw
day.
about 10 minutes of it.
Okay. He mentioned that when he was waiting outside the courtroom to go in to testify, that there was some man that said that he was some LA lawyer and came up to him.
I had no idea. I found out about that for the first time through,
Okay.
I mean, I think that was the first time I heard of that. That was, again, us being in the courtroom. If you could ask Terry Rose, his attorney, I have no idea who this person was. I didn't know the identities of everybody who was in the courtroom. Obviously, I mean, I tried to stay out of that stuff as much as possible. I mean, I was probably driving the court staff crazy because I was going in through like the back chambers door because I was trying to avoid the media at the other door. So,
but makes sense. So, did you hear about any other like funny business going on with witnesses or anything like that during trial?
There is not necessarily. So I don't want to put any onus on any person or organization because I'm not saying that any of this was, prosecutors or anything, but there were some big ethical problems that I had with a lot of things that were going on. I can't speak personal basis because I don't know people's motivations, but there were weird things going on. And unfortunately, I can't really get any more in detail about that because all I am doing is operating off my own suspicions and stuff. And I also don't want to identify anybody's names because some of these people are still potentially involved with things that Kyle's dealing with. But there were weird things going on.
Well, even just watching, I mean, for us watching the prosecution not turn over like the full file size and things like that. When
that was just we can finally talk about that.
Yeah. I know. Everybody's been waiting for it.
The tech stuff, and I left the LA County District Attorney's office almost 5 years ago. So evidence and digital evidence has changed tremendously in that amount of time. But I was so outraged. It's such a basic thing to turn over, making sure everyone has the same copy of everything.
Yeah. And also, sorry, I just wanted to bring up, I'm seeing people in the chat mention Dave Hancock. I was not referring to Dave Hancock in anything with the statements I was just making. I don't have any personal problems with Dave Hancock, and I'm not going to make any comments about his involvement or doing anything else. But I did want to set that record clear because I'm seeing people are saying that I was not in any way referring to Dave Hancock.
Got it. Makes sense. I'm glad you're watching the chat then.
Well, I mean, it was more of just looking at it. Oh, and somebody says, don't even look at the chat. Yeah. Well, part of what I want to do though is clear a little bit of the record on some things.
Makes sense.
Sorry, you're getting back into the files. Yes, that is what should be the situation. And so how that happened, we'll get a little more in depth to it now and this is all to the best of my recollection, obviously. So there was this drone footage at issue. I mean, because there's a couple different drone problems throughout this. We're talking about the drone that captured the second shooting, not the infrared fixed wing, because that's a completely different issue that there's so many problems with. But the drone itself, we were aware that the footage existed because it had been, I think it was on Tucker Carlson or something. And, we tried to get copies of this stuff and we couldn't. We sent investigators out to talk with Todd and Steve. We sent them out to talk with, the owner of the drone company. And he said that they weren't operating drones that night, that the license was for a different date, things like that. I don't remember exactly how many days after that happened. Mark has said it in some point in time, either in the trial or his interviews, but that man's business went under, or at least was closed. I don't know rationale reasons for any of those things. I have my suspicions, but there was an individual who had been interviewed previously by the prosecution about the video, I believe, and had denied, knowledge, access, anything like that. And so I get told during, you know, the middle of a court day that, you know, so all of a sudden we have this footage. They had said somebody who wished to remain anonymous, but then was identified basically later by Krause, you know, by name, had came in, and this was Detective Martin Howard. And I also, like, the detectives on this case, I don't want anybody to think that there's anything personally wrong with them. The state's detectives, they are both nice people. I don't, you know, there are certain ways about jobs that are done that everyone disagrees with, and I'm not going to comment on their actual performance in a lot of things. So I don't want anything of what I'm saying to be portrayed in that way, because, you know, the problem isn't necessary. I'm not going to point fingers at where the problem is. But so what happened was told that there was this footage. I was told that it had been dropped off by this individual. You know, we obviously wanted the footage as fast as possible. I was like, you know, can I get it on a flash drive? Well, they didn't have it a flash drive with them there. I would have to go over to the RPD to get it on a flash drive. The problem with that was, like I had mentioned earlier, for security reasons, they didn't want us going anywhere. It's just like that would have been a hassle. Like if we had been, you know, and being respectful of the situation and the people that were trying to help us, you know, and also my personal safety, like I don't want to necessarily run over to the police station and deal with this. Personally go. I didn't have a car down there. You know, it's not far away. It's just a couple blocks, but still, like, and there were also it was just not the ideal situation to happen. But we wanted it as fast as possible. So I believe I had asked if it was something that could be emailed to me. And because some files are too big, you know, and also I'm not a tech expert. I'm just under 35 and competent.
You sounded like a tech
that makes you
expert.
a tech
That's
expert
for sure.
in a law firm, by the way, because
no, I am the tax expert in my law firm because I'm the youngest attorney here. But and I can, you know, like open documents and print things. I'm really fancy.
find attachments and email. I know how
I'm
to
proficient.
apply all.
Yeah. You know, and I was told it could be emailed. I didn't have any reason. And I get this file. We look at the file and we're like, okay, this is basically the exact same. I mean, it was a little bit, it was a higher, it was a, you know, bigger effectively, because on Tucker Carlson, it's just that little thing in there. And if you're going to isolate it, you know, there's a certain amount of distortion that's going to happen when it gets larger. But it wasn't anything new. There wasn't any information in this video that we really were like, oh, okay, well, we just finally have this file. You know, woohoo. We also, so we had looked at it in that aspect, but when that file had been played in court, you know, this was also before we had brought in the high def TV in. We brought in the high def TV, the 4K TV, because John Black said that we should. When we were going over when we were going through stuff with him, you know, going through demonstrative stuff like that, there was, you know, on his laptop, there was some detail that you could see on his laptop that wasn't on the screen. And we were like, okay, well, we want to make sure that, like, for you, we've got all the details, stuff like that taken care of. So we brought in this TV, but like the monitors that we had in front of us aren't 4K monitors, the ones that were on our table. The TV that we could see is the one in the corner, which is far away and is also not a 4K TV. So, I mean, it had been played, but I mean, there was nothing discernible from what had happened, because, yeah.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, so how many days was it until, well, when did you first realize that you didn't have the full resolution file?
That day we were dealing about it in court, and they said that it wasn't the high resolution file. We had I had no reason to think there was any problems beforehand, because I mean,
because they would just say we can't email it if they couldn't email it.
Yeah.
You would never think anyone would compress it and email it.
And I really don't know how things happened with that. I mean, I have my suspicions, obviously, but part of the problem with this is that in the arguments that were made in court, stuff like that, is there were a lot of assumptions that were being made that were not informed, that were being presented as fact. And I don't want to make that mistake. you know, and I'm first to admit, as I mistakenly first was like, you know, and I think somebody had brought it up because it's in the video, you know, I got that from Dropbox from you. Well, I realized, you know, after the fact, no, that wasn't what we got. I had gotten on Dropbox. We gotten everything else from the state crime lab on Dropbox. It was just kind of in the moment, you know, you know, after I thought about it, I'm like, oh no, that's not actually how we got that. But, you know, we, didn't have any reason to believe it would be different. Everything else had been turned over to us on disks, on flash drives, on hard drives. This was, you know, I had noticed things with metadata previously that were a little bit weird. Like there were some, but they all were chalked up to camera stuff. Like there was some, like police camera, for example, that they're doing evidence on that, like the day was 1 day off type of thing, or like it hadn't accommodated for daylight savings time. There were things like that I'd noticed previously, but you know, that had been accounted for like otherwise. And we also didn't, so we get this file and we don't get the report on it because the state crime lab had taken the file, they enhanced the videos, and they also did those stills. As we also, you know, didn't get that report right away because they didn't have it at the same time as the video. So, you know, it wasn't because the state turned it over to us as soon as they, you know, we thought as soon as they got it, and then they separately sent it off to the state crime lab. So we don't get their report about these things until days later. So, you know, things like that, like the file name, metadata, stuff like that was over. You know, first of all, there was nothing in the report about the file size or the metadata. Really, the only thing in the report that indicated anything different was, like I'd mentioned in court, the receipt, the file name, because they always in the state crime lab rename things. So, you know, for their own working purposes.
I was wondering where the file names came from. I'm so glad you clarified
yeah.
that.
So there's
was doing it.
Yeah, that's where these file names came from, because the state crime lab was doing it. But there was, you know, the original file name receipt that they'd gotten, they indicate should have been the exact same one as that we had gotten. But we didn't notice it was until that there was any discrepancy until we were looking at the high def TV, and Krause was like, you know, is this the good version or something? And it's like, this should be the only version. If there's another version, that's the problem.
Good version. See, there's case law that says the version you have and the version I have are the
should be the same.
Yeah, there should be. And I don't know the intention on things. I'm not going to speak on because, again, I don't know. But
yeah, because we got some questions on that. People wanted to know if you thought it was intentional or not.
Well, and that was something actually that was something that actually. Well, first of all, I don't think that Binger had anything to do with it. He was nothing but forthcoming with me about that stuff, because and I mean, the only reason I found out that what the actual file was is I got it from him. You know, and he asked me after the hearing, you know, when we discovered all this stuff, if I thought they had intentionally given the wrong file. And I was like, it doesn't matter what my opinion is on this stuff.
So there was also like the dimensions of the file.
The aspect ratio and stuff. I know there are the issues with that. That was, you know, something that when that is also an issue. I mean, that is, again, I don't want to speak on things that I don't know a lot about. Like I said, I'm not a tech genius. I'm just very proficient, and I can tell that numbers should be the same. Right. It's like, oh, I can do math.
You know, so, where to look metadata.
I know where to look, and I'm like, I can have other people describe things to me. I'm like, this is like, why doesn't this match up with that? I know reasons. You know, I've got the predicate knowledge to know that certain things should match up, but you know, how things go about getting changed, other stuff, you know, is beyond my personal knowledge. But I do know things like, you know, the file name's not going to change if you're compressing it. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. And on that, another question that I got from people was, so when we were watching, you know, we started to get a lot of feedback from viewers, like a lot of DMs, emails, you know, all kinds of messages from people about not just about the the various qualities of this video and their own analyses of it, but also they went back and looked at
the handbrake. Yep, I know.
Exactly.
Yep.
Did you guys notice that?
Well, not at the time, but I mean, we probably had at least 400 people between phone calls and emails let us know all about that. But our tech people picked up on, like, after the fact, because we looked back at, different times and things. And so I think we were, one of the tech people we had dealing with stuff had noticed, had went back and found the timestamp as well. But it was, something that at the time it was happening, it doesn't, necessarily mean anything to you having it be on there. And I mean, part of the issue that we even know about that was because they kept their laptop plugged in when they're switching between programs. And Rakita actually had mentioned something about, because I had it with mine, like minimizing out and doing other screens and things. Because originally I hadn't. But there's just this lag between like plugging things in and getting things displayed. And there were issues with that Corey and Mark weren't happy with. And I was like, that's fine for if we want to do it that way. I just have to, scrub certain things, make sure that when I've got things up that, I'm not like accidentally showing something I shouldn't be.
You don't want to in the YouTube world, like expose your DMs because you're switching screens and you've got your Twitter DMs open, which happens to live streamers all the time. And you guys were experiencing that in real time in trial.
Yeah.
Were you using your personal computer, not like a computer for that trial that was just scrubbed to do?
No, that was not my personal computer. It's the evidentiary laptop. I mean, I'm actually on it right now.
It was the evidentiary laptop.
It was a laptop we bought specifically for this trial. There were certain tech specs, things like that, trial assistance programs that we wanted to have. We were like, okay, we want this. We talked to tech people. We're like, you need to tell us what computer to buy that we can do these things. And so we did that. And the only thing that the computer had been used for was this case, and then like Zoom court when I'd done like various other Zoom hearings, because it was like I was working on this computer anyway, so I might as well just bring it up when I got to do Zoom on a different case. But otherwise, that was the only. After there's still some saving of things that needs to be done, because there's obviously other issues going on, and we don't want to accidentally, inadvertently not have something available if Kyle needs it later. But that's the only thing that this computer was bought for this case, to be used on this case.
I was surprised the state didn't have, or it didn't seem to have an evidentiary computer. From watching it, seemed like it was just Krause's work computer that had.
Or if they did, it was highly suspect that they had handbrake on it.
True.
I don't remember, honestly, because that was during rebuttal, correct?
Yeah.
So previously in the trial, when they were showing evidence, there was somebody from their office who was running evidence off of a laptop in the back. So those things were coming from that. When they were doing their PowerPoints, things like that, in the end, they were, I don't know if they were personal computers or state computers, what they were, but
their work. It seemed like their regular work computers that they had all their stuff on, not a.
Yeah, that's what I mean. And I think they had like, it was those things that had things for like every case type of two. I mean, I don't know if there was anything specifically dedicated to this case. No, I don't know. That was something that, me being anal about throughout all of this, that I wanted to have. For ours, I don't really know how they were doing their things with that.
It was nice to see, because I think if jurors, it seemed confusing to me that when jurors were asking for exhibits, there was so much conversation. I'm like, isn't there just a thumb drive and a jury? Like, I was confused as to why there was confusion, and Krause was like, we could send back my computer. It's like, you can't send back your computer. And then what if it ends up getting appealed? And then you just send your computer off to the appellate court because you're running evidence off your computer? It seemed confusing to me that the prosecution hadn't either had a dedicated hard drive or something that could go back on a computer for the jury. It was odd to me.
Well, and they had said they were going to have that for evidence, and they eventually did, but it's not something that they did till like near the end of the trial. It's because I was being like very, very on top of those things, is, the court staff everybody, support staff were being so great to us. I was like, I'm not going to make your job any harder than it is. So like I, you know, traveling separately from other people, and like for security reasons, we weren't leaving cars down there, me having to get people, you know, having to get dropped off or picked up separately so I could make sure that they had everything that they needed, because I'm like, well, the evidence is closed now, so you need to have the evidence. And there were things like that. And then there was, you know, we happened to have an extra computer, and since, like I said, we weren't at our offices, and we have to be able to research and do things. And you know, so I was carting around 3 computers every day, 2 laptops, and then like my personal tablet with like a keyboard. And one of the laptops had actually been like scrubbed, rebooted, reset at some point because of, you know, some tech problem that it had. So it really didn't have anything on it. So that's the one that we ended up doing, because I'm like, well, this one's basically clean already.
So do you think that that sort of changes the way that maybe trials are done with I mean, obviously so much technology is advancing, and that's very common in the legal profession, that a lot of lawyers are not particularly adept, and that's why there have been a lot of updates to professional rules across a lot of states, is that is now an element of competency for lawyers. So do you think that there's likely to be sort of a change in the way that courts maybe do things, maybe at least in Kenosha? I don't know.
I don't know. Part of the problem, honestly, is an extent people being in control and in power over these things, being unfamiliar with them themselves. So it's hard to appeal to somebody who doesn't know why this is important to tell them it's important. So I have my concerns based on things like that. Also, the judicial system in itself is always very behind on technology. That's just like, if you look at case law, stuff like that, that's like the judicial system doesn't deal with new technology and the problems associated with it, and usually until after the fact when they've been a problem. So, I mean, in a world that I'm designing, everything's up to me. Yes, absolutely. You know, and I think there's so much stuff that just for efficiency and able to do your job, you should know. Like, I'm Cellbrite analyst certified, at least like the most basic level. I haven't done any of the other stuff, but it's like I have to look at these files and do this stuff. And there's always going to be things that you miss if you just have an investigator doing all your work. And having, you know, being comfortable with that stuff. And there's been stuff that I found in other cases that, you know, had been overlooked, but it's something that like I find in it because I know how to work the system. And that's another thing, you know, getting back into experts, like I was talking about previously, is a lot of times, a lot of attorneys have hard times working with experts because they don't have the base knowledge to know the questions that they have. Like I had said, you know, earlier with the problem with the millibytes thing is partially because, you know, I do know that it's megabytes, but, you know, my family is a medical family. My father was a physician. You know, my brain defaults to milli when it's, you know, when it's an M, if it's part of something. You know, when I was in law school, I had the pleasure of being an intern for a very, you know, a lot of times public defenders and stuff get a lot of crap. Travis Schwantes was the man that I worked with. I was his intern for, and he, you know, is one of the best attorneys I've ever worked with, and he's a public defender. And I just wanted to say that, you know, I know that some people have problems with things, but they're not all bad. But no, with
great public defenders,
there's amazing ones.
They're local. They know every judge. They know what the judges are going to sentence you. There's a lot. I mean, I think it's just fair that there's a lot.
Yeah. I just want to, this is like, it's something that bothers me is like, you know, these people get this crap, and I don't think it's well deserved. I mean, people don't get paid well enough for the amount of cases they're on, things like that, until you get to the higher levels. When you get up there, then it's a different story. But I mean, this was, you know, me as a 3L, one of the first cases I worked on with Travis was a shaken baby case. Well, I mean, and there's, you know, And one of the things, like, for example, that he had me do in that case was I got to translate all the medical lingo in things, is because I know I have a better predicate background of what those things mean. So I think that, just if you want to be as good as your job as you can, that you have to, whether you like it or not, familiarize yourself with certain concepts and the way certain things work, at least on a base level, because otherwise you miss so much.
And I think the thing when you were talking about working with investigators that those watching in the chat might not appreciate is that when the lawyer also understands enough, like Natalie clearly does, you also know what you have to prove. The investigators don't know what you need to prove in court. So the things that might be significant to them aren't necessarily the things that would be significant to the lawyer. But if the lawyer isn't familiar enough with the tech, they can't meld that knowledge, which you clearly did. This is what we're going to have to prove. This is what we need witnesses to say. And these are the questions I have. And that's just gone the extra mile to get those certifications. I think it's going to be the bare minimum in law for kids coming out of law school to have a strong background in tech.
Right.
I mean,
and the other thing,
things that I want to know also is it's because I'm like, I should understand the evidence in my case.
Absolutely. And the other part of it obviously is there's a challenge in trying to explain things to a judge who may not be very tech savvy. Do you feel like Judge Schrader had a decent grasp on the tech in this issue? Because I remember when it was either Bing or Krause, somebody sort of tried to indicate, well, we don't think that you understand anything, and we think that the defense is trying to pull the wool over your eyes.
It was so offensive. It was so boomery.
But he took it pretty well. That he was like, "Well, maybe I don't understand, but."
Well, I mean, he's very receptive to things, and I think one of the reasons why what I did was as successful as it was explaining to him in the right way. I'm getting this from you. So if I have the exact same thing that they have, I should have the same file name, I should have the same size file, and it should have the same metadata. I mean, that's just putting it simply. I did not have those things. So if you have something that has 3 times as much information than what I have, it's not the same thing. And that's, again, what I said, is people passing things off as, fact when they don't know what they're talking about is, that was a huge problem that I had throughout all this is, the portrayal of us as being dishonest with certain things is, I think the defense is trying to take advantage of your lack of technology. Okay.
You're the one who gave us the file that's not the same.
No, I mean, and previously it's like, it's not like Mark or Corey are ever pulling this out of their butts. Like, we have people who have explained it to us and why it's wrong and things. And, they're saying it's dishonest because I've had other people that have told me something different. No, that's a Daubert issue. That's the thing is, whether or not the scientific methods are credible, things like that. And you know what? They're using evidentiary systems in their case that says in the manual that they shouldn't be used for evidentiary purposes because it alters things. It's like, that my mother actually is still very upset about that. Because
I love it. I love that your mom's like, no, I'm mad too.
No, she was mad that I never got apologized to. That was her thing. Is she was like,
good mom.
She was like, you were right, and they didn't apologize to you. And I was like, well, I'm a criminal.
Welcome to being a lawyer, Mom.
Yeah.
But you were right.
Yeah, I was right. And that was the thing is, therefore, there is no way what he's saying is true. I mean, there was no way what he was saying was true.
Yeah.
And he's passed, and he goes into it afterwards as taking offense that I'm being dishonest. I don't know whether he was intentionally misrepresenting things or not, but what he was saying was not true. And that's, again, you're spinning it is, oh, I'm somehow offended that, I'm being accused of being dishonest. Nobody ever said, I didn't tell him that I thought he was lying. I was like, what you're saying is not true.
I think y'all went after I was surprised. And I think there were times I actually said that there was so much room for the defense to lose their minds on what the prosecutors were doing. It was so reined in. I think a lot of defense attorneys' heads would have literally exploded, and there would have been lots and lots of screaming if the prosecutors had done some of these things. I think where some of my like outrage came from watching this. I'm like, they've been restrained in the response to the
Yeah.
shit that you've already pulled.
Mhm.
And so now to continue to double down and try to change what it looks like was just so disingenuous from my perspective.
Yeah.
And that
No,
was
that's how it felt being part of it is, that was, I'm not going to say negative things about other people because,
well,
I,
you work in this field.
yeah, well, but it's like,
Yeah.
when you're telling me that we're being dishonest and taking advantage of somebody, you're just crying and saying that everybody's a liar but you. And,
You're the one who gave us the file that's the wrong size. We wouldn't be here talking
Right.
about this if we had the same thing.
yeah.
Right.
And
Because
it's,
I mean, rules of discovery do require that they provide you
Mhm.
exactly what it is that you are entitled to. So
And
that's their
yeah.
burden.
And I've seen people are like, oh, at different points, well, it's not a fair standard. Yeah. And it's not a fair standard.
Because somebody's going
That's
to
prison. Yeah. That's how it works.
Those are the rules. Those are the rules though. And the
Yeah, that's the
prosecutor
thing is that they should have a greater burden because they're not going to prison at the end of this.
you want, and I am a former prosecutor, you want the weight of the government to follow the rules. They have the
Mhm.
resources, they have the money, and they have the power to deprive people of life and liberty, depending
Yes.
on what state you
Mhm.
live in. They should have the highest standard to do that. And when they don't, that is what damages our justice system.
Mhm.
When the people with the
Yes.
power don't play by the rules, that's where the damage comes in. And I think that's why it
Exactly.
was so outrageous and offensive, because a lot of prosecutors go over and above and beyond to make sure everything is turned over, everything is clear, there are no mistakes, making sure their detectives have told them everything, sitting down with everyone with binders of evidence and flipping page by page. And they didn't seem to give a shit enough about doing their jobs in an upstanding way to make sure that things were taken care of. And then they were smug about it. It's where I felt so deeply outraged. And I'm
Yeah.
and it's just not good for our system. There has to be a balance. And when the government runs wild, there is no balance.
Right.
Well, and
Sorry.
I tell
It made me so
no,
mad.
that's fine.
I
I'm
know
trying not to rant too much on
you
this,
don't
but
get to rant on it because
yeah.
again, you're a defense attorney that works with this office that
Right.
still has to go into court and try cases with this office and needs them to be able to say, hey, we want to work, we have to work with you. Your client's best interest is in you being able to work with this office. So I can slam them on the internet, but your office.
Well, and I mean, I don't want, and this doesn't make it any right or better, but that's not an isolated problem,
Correct.
and my general belief is that if they can't prove their case the way they're supposed to prove their case, then they shouldn't be allowed to prove their case.
Or they
Right.
shouldn't file the case, but that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is a whole nother just can of worms there. But,
So with regard to this exchange over the drone footage, a lot of people want to know if there's going to be any kind of an investigation into it or any sort of reporting that's going to be done on the prosecutors in this case. People want to know. Do you know anything?
Nothing that I'm at liberty to discuss. There are lots of possibilities with a lot of different things.
It's okay to be like, we're looking into it. Moving on.
Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of what it is. And it's also one of those things that, the whole world watched. And regardless of whether formal actions are taken about things, there is, I think, at least bringing this to attention, an increased level of community responsibility that is going to be pushing these things. And that's sometimes the best way to effectuate change.
It
Because
boggles the light.
because the people are elected in this situation. They're the way to change things are to get different people in power, and the district attorney is an elected position.